Uncover Your Mind, Jung and Buddhist Wisdom. Interpreting the Soul, Two Ways of Understanding the Unconscious, Its Impact on Your Life, and the Buddhist Perspective. Have you ever wondered why you act the way you do, have strange dreams, or repeat patterns in your relationships? Depth psychology, with figures like Freud and Jung, offers us powerful tools to unravel these questions, delving into the fascinating world of the unconscious. These two giants of psychoanalysis proposed distinct approaches to understanding the messages our subconscious mind sends us, whether through dreams, slips of the tongue, or repetitive behaviors. Both perspectives, Freud's reductive and Jung's constructive, are valuable and provide us with keys to understanding ourselves, but with very different focuses and implications for our daily lives. Surprisingly, some of these ideas find profound parallels in ancient practices like Buddhism, offering a complementary path to self-discovery and transformation. Freud's view: exploring the past to understand the present, reductive approach. Freud, the father of psychoanalysis, believed that the key to understanding our current problems lies in our past, especially childhood experiences and repressed desires. He saw the unconscious as a reservoir of memories, traumas, and impulses that, if unresolved, continue to influence us in ways we don't even realize. Imagine your mind as an onion. For Freud, every external layer of behavior and suffering you exhibit today is a direct result of deeper, older layers formed in your history. The task of analysis is, then, to peel back these layers to get to the root of the problem, often a traumatic event, a repressed desire, or an unresolved conflict from childhood. How does this apply to your life? Seeking the root of the problem. Think of that person who consistently gets into abusive relationships or who has difficulty holding down a job. A Freudian approach would seek to understand what past experiences, perhaps in childhood, shaped this pattern. For example, difficulty committing can be reduced to an unconscious fear of abandonment, stemming from an early experience of loss, such as parental separation or neglect by a caregiver. The goal is to bring this experience into consciousness so that it loses its power over the present. Identifying repetitions of old patterns. Have you ever noticed that you react to your authoritarian boss the same way you reacted to your demanding father or teacher? For Freud, this is no coincidence. Your boss can be seen as a projection of a controlling father figure from the past. By recognizing that your anger or fear toward your boss is not just about the current situation, but a repetition of a relationship pattern with an authority figure, you have the chance to break this cycle. You begin to understand that the intensity of your emotions may be disproportionate to the present situation because they are loaded with unresolved feelings from the past. The complementary Buddhist perspective. While Freud seeks the origin in the personal past, Buddhism goes further, discussing karma and past existences. While not a search for childhood traumas in the Freudian sense, the Buddhist concept that our past actions, thoughts, and words in this or previous lives shape our present reality resonates with the idea that patterns repeat themselves. The practice of insight meditation, vipassana, for example, allows us to observe the arising and passing of thoughts and sensations, including those that reveal ancient conditioning, the sankharas, which would be analogous to Freudian complexes. The difference is that in Buddhism, the focus is not so much on past guilt or cause, but on observing and detaching from these patterns to free the mind in the present. Jung's vision: constructing the future from the unconscious. Constructive approach. Jung, a disciple who later diverged from Freud, brought a different perspective. For him, the unconscious is not only a repository of the past, but also a rich source of potential and resources for our future development. He doesn't ignore the past, but his primary focus is on the meaning and purpose of the symbols that emerge from the unconscious and how they can propel us toward wholeness and self-realization. Jung saw the soul as a living organism, constantly evolving. Symptoms, dreams, and conflicts are not only the result of past traumas, but also messages and invitations from the unconscious for us to become more whole. How does this apply to your life? Discovering inner resources for the future. Let's return to the person experiencing relationship difficulties. Instead of focusing solely on past traumas, the Jungian approach would encourage them to seek out the positive and potential in their unconscious to build healthier relationships. Perhaps the difficulty in forming relationships is a signal for her to develop more autonomy and self-confidence before committing to a relationship, or for her to learn to express her own desires and limits assertively. The weapon in the original example could be, in this case, the ability to establish healthy boundaries, to stand up for herself, and to seek what she truly wants in a partner, rather than submitting. Transforming fears into potentials. Have you ever had a recurring dream about being chased? A constructive interpretation wouldn't limit itself to finding the cause of the fear in the past, but would ask, what is this chase telling you about a part of yourself that you're avoiding? What do you need to face or develop in your life? The pursuer could be a neglected aspect of your own personality, perhaps a part of you that is assertive, creative, or ambitious, but which you repress out of fear or insecurity. By integrating this aspect, fear transforms into potential for personal growth. Moving from passivity to action. Imagine that you see yourself as someone who is always passive, who easily gives in to the will of others. A constructive interpretation of a symbol like the sword, representing willpower, would push you to recognize your inherent will and discernment. In practice, this could manifest in finally making an important decision autonomously, such as changing jobs, starting a bold personal project, or expressing a strong opinion in a family discussion rather than simply agreeing. It is an invitation to take charge of your own life. The complementary Buddhist perspective. Jung's constructive approach, with its focus on potential and wholeness, finds a direct echo in Buddhism. The Buddhist goal of enlightenment, nirvana, is not just liberation from past suffering, but the full realization of human potential, cultivating qualities such as wisdom, compassion, and equanimity. Meditation is not just about cleansing the past, but about building new mental qualities and a clearer perception of reality. The Eightfold Path, for example, is an active construction of a life with righteous intention, speech, action, and effort, all directed toward future development and liberation. Jung's weapon in Buddhism could be wisdom, panya, the ability to discern reality and act skillfully, overcoming ignorance and the attachments that limit us. Suggestion and psychological availability. Why do some advice resonate more than others? Jung also addressed a common objection. Is constructive interpretation merely a suggestion from the therapist? He argued that no suggestion is accepted without a corresponding psychological availability on the part of the patient. In other words, If an idea, advice, or interpretation sticks and becomes lasting, it is because the individual already had an internal inclination toward that idea, a seed already planted in their unconscious. The power lies not in the suggestion itself, but in the resonance it finds within the person. Practical examples. Advice that sticks. You receive advice from a friend to change a habit, such as starting to exercise. If this advice resonates with something you are already thinking or feeling, your availability, you are much more likely to adopt it. You already had an inclination to improve your health. But if this connection isn't there, the advice will be quickly forgotten or ignored, even if your friend insists. He didn't find fertile ground in you. The inspiring message in a film. You watch a movie and a specific phrase or scene impacts you deeply, leading to a change in perspective on your life, or inspiring you to take action. This isn't a magic suggestion from the film, but rather because this message touched something that was already latent within you, an unconscious need or desire that needed a trigger to surface. The film simply expressed something you already felt. The complementary Buddhist perspective. In Buddhism, the idea of psychological readiness is crucial to the effectiveness of the teachings. Buddha taught in different ways to different people, recognizing that the capacity for understanding, dana, varies. A practice or teaching only makes sense and is internalized if the practitioner's mind is ready or ripe to receive it. Faith, thadda, in Buddhism is not blind, but a trust in the possibility of transformation based on personal experience. Just as Jung's suggestion needs resonance, Buddhist teachings require an openness and an inner inclination to be truly absorbed and transformative. If you're not yet ready for meditation, for example, the advice to meditate won't stick, no matter how well-intentioned. The transcendent function in practice, beyond therapy and dreams. Jung observed that during therapy, the transcendent function, the union between the conscious and the unconscious, which guides us toward wholeness, is initially strongly supported by the analyst. However, the ultimate goal is for the patient to become self-supporting, accessing and integrating their own unconscious material. Although dream interpretation is an ideal method for this, Jung recognized that it is very difficult to effectively analyze one's own dreams as they tend to be fragmented and illogical. For the transcendent function to be produced by the individual in everyday life, it is necessary to access unconscious material in other ways. Other sources of unconscious material you may notice. Waking interferences. Those thoughts that pop into your mind for no apparent reason, sudden images, sensations, or intuitions that seem to come from nowhere. Free associations, saying the first thing that comes to mind in response to a word, image, or situation. This reveals unconscious connections. Gibberish ideas, seemingly disconnected thoughts that arise and at first glance make no logical sense. Memory gaps and forgetfulness, where you put your keys, the name of someone you know well, an important task you forgot. Symptomatic acts, small gestures, unconscious habits, or accidents, such as nail biting, finger tapping, or tripping repeatedly, that may have a hidden meaning. These materials, although often fragmentary and subtle, are more valuable to the constructive process because they reveal insights into unconscious dynamics in the present moment, propelling the person forward and toward wholeness. Practical examples of accessing the unconscious outside of dreams. Insights during a walk or in the shower. You're thinking about a problem at work, and suddenly, while walking or showering, an idea pops into your head seemingly out of nowhere. that helps you see the situation in a new way or find a solution. This is an interference from the unconscious in the waking state, bringing a new perspective. The revealing faux pas, slip of the tongue. You're talking to a coworker, and suddenly you call them by the name of an ex-partner or say something you didn't mean to say, a faux pas. Analyzing this faux pas may reveal an unconscious thought or feeling you've been repressing. For example, calling your boss by your father's name may indicate an unresolved unconscious authority dynamic being projected onto your current relationship. The unexplained habit. You find yourself compulsively checking to see if the door is locked several times before bed, even though you know you've already done so. This symptomatic act may be a sign of anxiety or a need for control that your unconscious is trying to express. By exploring what's behind this habit, you can find its root cause, perhaps an underlying fear of vulnerability, and develop healthier coping mechanisms. Forgetting something important you didn't want to do. You forget to call someone or keep an appointment you secretly didn't want to keep. This forgetfulness is often not accidental, but a manifestation of the unconscious refusing to cooperate with a demand that it dislikes or that goes against its true desires. The complementary Buddhist perspective. In Buddhism, the waking state interferences and free associations are analogous to the experiences observed in mindfulness meditation, samatha vipassana. During meditation, we are invited to observe, without judgment, the thoughts, emotions, and sensations that arise. These interferences are seen not as problems, but as manifestations of the conditioned mind, which can be observed and understood. The revealing blunder is an example of how the unconscious mind manifests itself, and Buddhism teaches us to cultivate self-compassion and impermanence to avoid becoming attached to these manifestations. Furthermore, the practice of contemplation, chan, reflection on teachings or experiences, and even the recitation of mantras can be ways to access and influence the unconscious, not to analyze it, but to purify it and direct it toward more beneficial mental states. The idea is that by cultivating positive mental states, such as benevolence and gratitude, negative unconscious manifestations lose their power. Jung's transcendent function, which seeks wholeness, finds a parallel in the Buddhist quest for the enlightened mind, where there is no longer a separation between the self and the universe, and wisdom and compassion arise naturally. By opening ourselves to these manifestations of the unconscious in our daily lives, and by combining the lens of depth psychology with the ancient wisdom of Buddhism, we can cultivate a more robust, transcendent function, integrating what is hidden and moving toward a more authentic, conscious, and suffering-free life. Have you experienced any of these manifestations of the unconscious in your life, and how have you addressed them?